Hello everyone, and yes, don't worry, I will cover this game. I've been receiving a lot of messages for the past few minutes, as you know, it's not like this is one of the games I'm not going to cover, so this is maybe one of the cases where using hashtag suggestion is not all that important, because of course it's the candidates tournament. We are going to cover not all of the games, but all of the more important games, and this is a very important one, as FIDE is trailing by a full point behind the leader Yanni Pomnishi, and Giri trailing only half a point behind him. So both of them have an excellent chance of catching up to the leader in this game. But that being said, I'm always more than happy to receive your hashtag suggestions, so do share. Let's check out the game. FIDE has the white pieces and he opens with e4. We have c5 by Giri going for the Sicilian defense. We have knight to f3 and now e6 going for the so-called French variation of the Sicilian. We have d4, captures, and now knight to f6, attacking the e4 pawn. We have knight to c3 and now knight to c6, putting pressure on white's d4 knight, and now a3. So this has all been played before many times. We have bishop to e7, preparing to castle, and bishop to e3 now. We have now transposed into the Taimano variation of the Sicilian, and here Giri just castles. We have bishop to e2 by FIDE and now d6, and this position has been reached quite a few times. Castles is a known move here, queen to d2 is a known move here, even the immediate g4 is a known move here because black castled quite early, but here FIDE goes for queen to d3, and it is already as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. No doubt he prepared something special for this game, as it's the candidates tournament. He really needs a win to get closer to the leader Yanni Pomnishi, and it's a tough position to be in for both of them, because even though if this was just a casual classical game, both of them would be happy with a draw, I imagine, but since it's not, of course both of them need a win. So here we have bishop to d7 by Giri, and now f4. Kind of delaying castling for the moment. We have e5 by Giri, striking in the center right away, saying, okay, if you're not castling, we're opening up the position. Knight captures on c6, b captures now, improving his presence in the center, and only now does FIDE castle king side. We have e captures on f4, bishop captures on f4, and now bishop to e6. Now both the bishop and the queen need to guard the d6 pawn, so bishop to e6, and now queen to g3. Kind of still having pressure on d6, maybe the rook can come to d1, improve the tension, and also if you're not careful, maybe ideas like bishop to h6 will be possible in the future, who knows. So here Giri shifts the knight over to d7. He says the d6 knight is actually defended by a tactic. Point is, if you capture it, bishop captures on d6 right away, then queen to b6 check, and you go after the b2 pawn. If king h1, we're just going to capture on d6, queen captures, and now queen captures on b2. The knight is under attack, the c2 pawn is under attack, and it's not a great position for white. So instead, after this knight to d7, there's no bishop to h6 right away, because bishop to f6 is just very strong, so it's pretty much pointless. So instead, after knight to d7, we have rook 8 to d1, like we said, adding another attacker here, and now rook to e8 by Giri. For the moment, queen to b6 check doesn't really do anything, but we will show it. Queen to b6 check, and now white can simply block with bishop to e3. And now if you go after this pawn here, it's trouble for black, because bishop to d4. Now putting pressure on g7, you're threatening checkmate. And now of course if bishop to f6, you can just eliminate it with the rook, and after knight captures, just bishop captures, you've won material, you're still threatening checkmate, and it's really bad position to be in. So what you would have to do is, after bishop to d4, play something like knight to e5, block it this way, but it's still insufficient. Just rook to b1, queen captures on c2, and now rook f to c1, and now, well, after you move the queen to d2, which is the only square, bishop to e3 now traps the queen. The queen has no squares, but you don't lose the queen, you can just give up the bishop, and that's it. For example, now bishop captures on d2, bishop captures, and h captures, we're going to be up a piece in a winning position. So after rook 8 to d1, queen to b6 still doesn't work. So we have rook to e8 by Giri, and now comes king to h1. And here the situation on the clock is 40 minutes for FIDE, 55 minutes for Giri. And it's Well, more often than not, a nice prophylactic idea whenever you have this diagonal opened up, when you know, you constantly have to worry about, okay, I play this, what if queen to b6 check now? Okay, I play this and this, what if queen to b6 check now? So this way you play king to h1, and you no longer have to worry about that ever. So here, queen to b8 by Giri, now adding a defender to the d6 pawn once again, but basically now going after the b2 pawn. So here, b4, Fabi defends it, and now knight to e5, blocking that attack. We have b5, putting pressure on c6, and here rook to c8. Here we have trades, or rather captures on c6, we have rook captures on c6, and now knight to d5. And this is now a beautiful square for the knight. If black wants to get rid of it, he's going to have to give up the light square bishop. So instead we have queen to f8 by Giri, now preparing to bring this rook into the game, and now c3. The pawn is kind of weak here on c2, so you have to defend it. We have c3, and now comes rook 8 to c8. Here, Giri is putting pressure on that c3 pawn, so rook to c1, and Fabi really spent a lot of time here. Since he's the one with the white pieces, he's the one that's supposed to be pushing, but it's 16 minutes for Fabi versus 40 minutes for Giri, and he doesn't have all that much to show for. So here we have knight to g6, attacking the bishop, bishop back to d2, and now bishop to h4. The queen now has to move. We have queen to e3, and now rook to c5. Again, threatening to win material here, but captures, captures, and captures is coming. And now c4. The c3 pawn isn't all that impressive here, so here we have c4. It's nicely defended here by the bishop and by the rook, and also maybe you can use this diagonal for the dark square bishop in the future. And here Giri goes for the absolute strongest h6. Now, he's preparing bishop to g5, which immediately counters white's threat. White's threat was just bishop to b4, and now you don't really have the option. If you go for this now, bishop to g5, and it's trouble for white. So instead, after h6, we have queen to b3 by Fabi, and now bishop to g5, and this is all very, very impressive stuff by Giri. Bishop captures, h captures, and now queen back to g3. And now, what do you play here? The g5 pawn is under attack. Fabi has 10 minutes on the clock. Giri has some 21 minutes on the clock. And here, you have basically two choices. Either you defended the g5 pawn with queen to d8, or maybe you trade first, captures, captures, and then maybe queen to e7, defended like this, also attack the bishop here. And if queen f3, defending the bishop and putting pressure on black's f7 pawn, then we can just shift this knight to e5, and this is now officially a monster knight because it's on a dark square. White has no pieces that can oppose it. You can maybe trade it off for a rook at some point in the future, but other than that, you only have a light square bishop. This knight is staying here for the rest of the game. It's attacking white's weak c4 pawn, also defending your weakness, so you really have nothing to worry about here for the rest of the game. But okay, Giri went for a different idea. He played queen to d8, and now we have rook c to d1. Preparing to mount more pressure, you know, towards this d6 pawn, and now bishop captures on d5, saying, okay, let's now close down the d file, and if rook captures, if you wanna, you know, keep this pressure, then we can just play knight f4, and there's, you know, no counterplay here for white. It doesn't really matter if you play rook captures. You can play rook captures, queen f3. Defending the bishop, but that's pretty much it from white. There's not much happening here. So instead, after bishop captures on d5, we have e captures on d5 by Fabi, and now comes knight to f4. And as you can see, this knight is now much stronger than this bishop. We have queen to f2, defending it, and of course white would be very happy if black would trade here. Then the f7 pawn falls, but just rook 8 to c7, adding a defender here. Even though black is never really interested in giving up this knight, it's much better than this bishop. So rook to d4, adding another defender to the c4 pawn, also putting pressure on the knight here, and now queen to e8 with a double attack on the bishop, and now Fabi's in trouble. You can't really defend it. For example, if rook to e1, just rook e7, we add another attacker here, and if rook to d2, now just rook to e3, and that's it. White is basically without a move. If we try to kick away the knight with something like g3, then you just, you know, checkmate the white king, queen e4 check, king g1, knight h3 check, king f1, queen h1 check, and now we're gonna deliver checkmate very nicely. So after queen to e8, here Fabi goes bishop to f3, gives up the c4 pawn, but it doesn't matter because he's going to win the a7 pawn. However, a rook captures on c4 was played. We have captures, and now queen captures on a7. But now Giri plays rook to a4, attacking Fabi's queen and the pawn, and this is the critical moment in the game where Fabi has two options. He's on move 36. He has a few more minutes before time control, and he needs to find the absolute strongest move to survive this position. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find the move that saves the game for Fabi while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding an incredibly difficult to spot move. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, no, it's not that. I'm only joking. It is, of course, queen to c7. It'd be weird if it was that, since it's white's move. I just wanted to make a silly move, and then I picked up the black queen. What are you gonna do? So yeah, queen to c7, and this is such a hard move to spot. Point is, you have to give up the a3 pawn, and then what happens is that you just go h4, and that's how you completely, break harmony between black's pieces. Point is, if the pawn is captured, then just queen captures on d6, now attacks the knight and the rook, and this is how you survive everything. And if it doesn't matter if black doesn't capture that pawn, you have to play something. Let's say you go knight back to g6. Now you play h captures on g5, and now you retain equal material, and you still have pressure on d6, and it's a very much playable position for white. However, after this queen captures on a7 move, rook to a4, now Fabi played queen back to f2, and this simply is not enough. Giri grabbed the pawn, rook captures on a3, now he's up a pawn, and he has a very, very active position. We have h4, but now it's a little bit different. Giri just plays queen to e5. A beautiful centralizing move with the queen. Also keeps an eye on the h2 square, keeps an eye on the a1 square, so really really does everything if needed. In the future, those are crazy arrows, I know. So here h captures on g5 by Fabi, and the situation on the clock is 2 minutes for Fabi, 12 minutes for Giri, and 2 more moves until we reach time control. So queen captures on g5. We have rook to e1, getting the rook to the nice open e file. Maybe you can put some pressure, maybe some bishop here to control h7, maybe move it back, maybe deliver checkmate, who knows. You have to try something, and Giri now just goes back. Rook to a8, and now comes the bishop to e4. A nice square for the bishop, still controlling the h7 square, defending the pawn, and asking black, what do you want to do here? And here, bishop to e4 is one idea. Maybe you could also play rook to f1 to kind of try and put pressure on f7. Maybe if the knight moves, you have a nice discovery, but it's all very, very not the greatest of chances of that happening. So instead, bishop to e4, like we said, and now comes rook to a2 by Giri. And now this is move 40. Both of them reach time control, and this is Giri spent quite a lot of time, not a lot of time, maybe like 7 minutes for this move. And it's funny because now that he played, Fabi was awarded additional time, so he has enough time to calculate this move. But it's a really nice idea, because if the rook is captured, then we just deliver check, connect with the rook, and after the king moves, we capture the rook, check, king moves, and then we capture the bishop, and then we're, of course, completely winning. Fabi, of course, not interested in that. Fabi plays rook to b1, and he offers the queen, because we already said the bishop covers h7. So if Giri grabs the queen, rook to b8 check, and there's only one move, queen to d8, rook captures on d8. This is now checkmate. The bishop covers h7. So instead, after rook to b1, Giri said, all right, you did not fall for that. He goes back, rook to a8, but the problem is Giri's position is so great that he could afford this little inaccuracy, because instead of going this, okay, the position repeated, so I don't have to show it. Fabi went back, rook to e1, and he said, okay, if you didn't find it then, maybe you don't find it now. But now Giri finds it, as now he plays f5, and this is just enough. This makes all the difference in the world, because now you no longer have back rank issues. The bishop no longer covers h7. You can play king to f7. You can bring the rook to h8, and there's not much for Fabi to do here. Fabi played bishop to b1. Bishop to c2 doesn't really matter. Even if bishop to c2, you can then play something like rook here, also maybe harass white a little bit. But he played bishop back to b1, and now king to f7. It's a very safe square for the king, not, you know, and nothing can really attack that king, and rook to h8 is coming. So here, rook to e3. The rook no longer serves any purpose on the back rank, as this rook is coming to h8, but this does not help Fabi. So rook to h8 was played, this comes with check, king to g1, and now for the final time, feel free to pause the video and win the game for Giri while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding, well, a lot of moves to win, just any move, queen g6, g6, queen to h6, those are all winning ideas that will, you know, win over the course of time, but knight captures and g2 wins on the spot. This is what Giri played, and it was in this position on move 45 that Fabiano Caruana resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So really a tough blow for Fabi. He was really trying to catch up to Jan Nepomniachtchi. Okay, everyone is trying to catch up to Jan, but it is, you know, if someone told me that in the second half of the candidates tournament Fabi would lose a game with the white pieces, I would say, yeah, that's not happening. But here, like, it was a position where both of them had to win. A draw doesn't really work for either of them, and then, you know, things just happen. So here Fabi resigned because if you capture the knight, then just queen captures on e3 with check, and that's it. There is no counterplay here. Queen f2, we're just gonna deliver check, either pick up the bishop, or if queen blocks, just rook to h1 with check. We push pull the king away from the defense of the queen. Now queen captures, and that's just it. We're gonna grab the bishop as well, and, you know, the game just ends in a few more moves. So after knight captures on g2, Fabi resigned, and Giri is now, well, up a full point from where he was. That means that since you know, I'm not going to spoil the results for anyone, but we still don't know how Nepo's game went. So Giri definitely caught up to Nepo. Maybe he's even ahead of him. Maybe, you know, who knows, maybe Nepo is still in the lead. We're going to show at least one more game from round 11, and then we're going to discuss the standings as usual. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Really a tough one for Fabi, but you know, great stuff for Giri. He's one step closer to challenging Magnus for the title. I would like to thank David Kimura, Lucas Berlund, Robert Lunier, Mohamed Salih Safa, and Jacob Gonzalez for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the candidates tournament, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day, and do keep those hashtag suggestions coming.